welcome back, everyone. My name's John.
And I'm Wes, and we're just going to jump right back into part 2 of our conversation with Gavin.
That's right. And so just as a refresher, Gavin is a longtime friend of ours and also someone who has done a whole bunch of work in the industry in relation to music, whether it's as a producer, as someone who's creating music, and also engineering music and all the above. So happy to just jump right back into this conversation and delve into it a little bit more from the perspective of an audio guy.
Going back to the live venue thing, man, if I could take time off work to just spend time bitching about live venues in Toronto and fixing it, I would. It's like, I've seen bands that, they've been touring the world. They come to Toronto and they play a room that sounds like ass, and they can't figure out why the part that they know in every one of their shows is going to make the band go crazy, is going to make the crowd go crazy,
right.
Isn't making the crowd go crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing Little Dragon at the Danforth Music Hall, and they were playing like the chorus to one of their biggest songs that everybody loves. And the crowd, Toronto crowds, you can talk about the problems with that, but like the crowd wasn't excited about what was happening sonically. And it's a subconscious thing that happens where when you're in a room that rocks, you're like, oh my God, this is my favorite part of the song. But when it kind of is in a room where the sound is just bouncing all around the walls and it's not really focused, then the crowd doesn't react like that. And I remember looking at these performers who are some of my favorite performers, and they're looking at each other like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
Because their monitor mix probably sounds awesome.
Right.
So they can't figure out why the crowd sucks.
Yeah.
And it's because these venues don't give a shit about how it sounds and just don't do simple things to make it better. And I let people slide on the fact that most of us don't understand why a mix is bad or why something is not sounding right. But you can feel it, and when it feels good, you know it. And you don't know why, but it's like something is happening to you.
An intangible feel. I love that.
It's an amazing thing.
Yeah. And that also makes sense too, because I feel like to the point of you sort of highlighting that there are a lot of folks that maybe, they like hugely underappreciate the role of an audio engineer and just that vantage point. Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny because it's like, if it sounded like garbage, someone would go, oh, this sounds like garbage. But when it sounds good, people don't think about it at all.
Yeah, that's what I expected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just like, even that process, and it's kind of like from the perspective of the person doing the engineering, it's kind of like, so I spent a good amount of time to get it there. That's why you're able to just so digest it. It's a difficult thing to wrestle with. Like, and this really goes for TV and film stuff. Like, my job in that world especially is to not be noticed. Like, if you're like, whoa, that guy's voice sounds weird, or why didn't that cat meow when its mouth opened, or I don't know, whatever, you will notice, and it will irk you and throw you out of the mental space of being in the film. But when it's working correctly, you do not think about it at all. And that is like a badge of honor when you do it right, but it's also so frustrating. People are like, you're like, how did it sound? And they're like, it was good. Normal. And you're like, wasn't it so sick how that sound lined up with the cat? And they're like, whatever, man.
What? Oh, didn't the cat do that? No, it yawned and we added a meow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
But, there are days where it bothers me. Cat meows and stuff, whatever. But, like, there are days where details like that not being picked up on bother me. But most of the time, I appreciate that it's like, it's just not what people think about. I'm like, that is my main focus in life, is sound.
Right.
So, of course, I'm going to think about all that stuff. But I'm equally probably not paying much attention to the lighting in a movie.
Mm-hmm. True. That's fair. That's a fair point.
I appreciate it when it's good, and I love cinematography and stuff. But, like, I don't understand why a scene is, or how a scene is lit. To make me feel a certain way.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I'm sure there's cinematographers out there that are like, God damn it, nobody wrote about the gels I used on those lights or whatever,
No, it's true. It's true. And that's kind of true, I guess, of just every line of work, every industry, whatever, has its like nuanced aspects that only someone who speaks that language can truly or fully understand.
Yeah.
You know, and or is even aware of it. Like I always kind of think about it like, you know, if you go into a dentist's office and they're like, didn't you notice my bicuspids, bro? Like, you see what I've been doing? See how much flossing I've been doing? See how good that is? And you're like, I don't know, they're teeth, right?
Yeah.
Horrible example, but something like that,
but
you know, where it's
I mean,
just
it's a valid example. It's
Yeah.
like people who are experts in their fields are going to notice the subtle details.
Yeah.
But
it falls short for
But there's a line crossing for me. If we're gonna, let's walk down the dentist analogy. Like, if you do not brush your teeth and you're like, my teeth are fine,
right?
Then like you're disgusting and I hate you. You know what I mean? Not really. No, but like I mean, if you're a person that like walks through life like dental hygiene doesn't matter, most people will be like, yeah, but it does though. But if you're a person who walks through life like, who cares if the audio sounds like shit and it's distorted? People will be like, yeah, whatever. Like,
there's no like
there's no equivalent for audio. Like,
yeah.
And then there's all these things in the audio sort of post-production experience that are like, they just make you feel other, or what's the term, like sort of, you just last in the line of thought, you know, always. So it's like the remaining budget goes to you, the remaining time goes to you, you know, all that stuff. So it can be, if you dwell on it, it can be very frustrating. I think the best thing is just to work with people that you know do respect the work, and then try and just focus on those relationships as much as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, even like with music, it's very different than other art forms because there's no visual piece to it, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just an auditory thing. And you mentioned like the feel earlier, but it's like an intangible feel, right?
Yeah.
It's not like something that you're touching and like I can feel, like, you know. So that's like, and as you're mixing an album or producing an album or even just your own stuff, like, you know, there's a vulnerability to just that one sense that's all there is.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So there's such an emphasis on how it's mixed or how it sounds or and like you said even earlier, Gavin, how it feels, like how that sound feels. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas like, say for example, with the example that you're saying with like a film, it's like, yeah, when you're watching a film, there's the dialogue.
You're hearing it, you're seeing it, right?
Yeah,
like there's multiple senses at play, but with music, it's very vulnerable in that.
Yeah, and
there's a thing, you know, which is just undeniable, that human beings are like visually oriented creatures. You know, like even blind people, I've like heard and read that like a lot of blind people really visualize a lot of things, even if they were born without sight. They've, you know, it's hard to describe what that would look like, but their visual cortex is still doing things because like that's how powerful that part of our brain is. To us.
Right.
So it's like when you are able to listen to music with no visual distraction, or like where there's no visual tied to it, it can be amazing because it'll actually bring you out of the world or change the visuals you're seeing. I remember like one thing that really got me excited a lot when I was a kid was like when I would listen to a piece of music, when I first got like a Walkman that I could listen to headphones and walk around the world in, or with, having music make it feel like I was in a movie.
Right.
Like, you know, there's this one memory I have that like is just so important to me for some reason, where I was going to Ireland for my grandfather's funeral, and it was 1994, I think, or 96. I can't remember the year now. And I'm on the plane. It's raining outside. We're like, I think, just sort of taxiing to take off. And on the headphones, because like back then, your little armrest had like a number of stations on it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
There was no TVs in every seat and whatever. You just, being that.
And there were
guy.
generic stations. It was like a rock station or country,
you
or
could
like
flip through, you know, whatever it was, 6.
Yeah.
And it's literally a tape loop probably somewhere in the plane that's just playing all these songs.
Yeah.
So I was listening to whatever the station was, and Sinead O'Connor, Nothing Compares to You, one of the best songs Prince ever wrote, it was on. And I'm listening to this song, and there's something too about the tapey. There's like a worn out tape that it's on, so it has this fuzzy sort of sound to it. And it's raining outside, and I'm thinking about my grandfather, and I'm like looking out the window, and I just remember being like, I'm in a movie. Like I feel like I'm in a movie because this is the soundtrack to this scene of my life right now.
Right.
And it was a crazy thing because otherwise I would just be a guy sitting on a plane waiting to take off. Like
Right.
So music can affect your visual experience
Big
too,
time.
which
Big
is
time.
really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if that was even adding to what you were saying.
No, that's like honestly, I love that that sort of story and just how music plays into like so many other parts of our lives, right? Like I definitely can empathize with that. I remember I was in France once at the beach of Dieppe. So World War, all these Canadians kind of went to this beach just before D-Day, just as an attempt to like try it out, and it was just a massacre more or less.
Yeah.
The Tragically Hip wrote a song about it called Nautical Disaster, which is like
I didn't know that was about that.
Yeah, one of their like best songs. And so I had my cassette player with me when I was there, and I was like unbeknownst, right? I knew that song was on this album, but then it just came on next.
Oh wow!
And I was on the beach, and I'm like, holy smokes! And it was just this very like surreal moment of just. Yeah, like I'm in a movie. Yeah,
it really puts meaning to the music.
Yeah, but it's just like we were saying earlier, that intangible feel of just like holy smokes, like this auditory thing is just like all my senses are just like tingling. Because,
yeah, totally.
And this is hitting it. Well, I do want to flip back to one thing you said earlier though, Gavin. Like, just from a technical perspective, you mentioned Motown and just the sort of simplicity of how to record something, right? And as time goes by and technology becomes more and more advanced and accessible for people, like how do you think from your perspective in music production and everything, like technology has like played a role in either accessibility, or has it been good? Has it been bad from your perspective? Has it like hindered the creative process? Has it made it a bit easier? Like
both. Yeah. Good and bad. Like, I'm lucky to be alive in a time where everybody can have a home studio. It was not, I mean, even when I started making, as I was describing, when I started making music on a computer was not available to the average person. It was like you could get, I think at that time, Pro Tools was just beginning to be Pro Tools. It was called like, so I can't remember the name of it, but it had a few iterations, but it was a professional software which cost thousands and thousands of dollars. Like, I didn't have access to that, and so to learn and to figure that out was really difficult. But because I was coming up in that time, I was learning to basically make myself a home studio. And that wouldn't have been possible previously. And as I've aged and, we get to where we are now, we're like, we can record a podcast in this space where you just set up a laptop and bing, bang, boom, plug in some mics. Like, that's amazing. We don't really think about how cool it is, but it's really cool. So there's the benefits to me are like the fact that if I want to record something right now, anywhere I am, I can do it. My phone can do it.
Yeah.
And have like decent quality to it too.
Or
right?
you can get a little thing that plugs into your phone if you really want some,
Right. So it's just very accessible. That makes all that stuff just so accessible.
But the negative aspects of it are that I think you lose a few things. You lose intentionality. Like there was something to like, and even now I have a studio where I go and I work because that is like, it puts me in the mode of work. Also, I need a certain acoustic environment and whatever to do what I do. But like, there's like an intentionality that's lost when you can just do it anytime, anywhere on your phone. And like, so everything's a bit throwaway. But, again, I'm not shitting on people who make, like there are great records that are actually, made on phones and stuff. Like, it's not impossible to do.
But there's probably like a cajillion records that are made on phones that
are
people
garbage.
aren't listening to. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think ubiquity of technology has hurt is like the unlimited options. Like I think before we started recording, I was talking to you about how like I believe that art is about limitations. You know, it's like whether they're self-imposed or otherwise, just having like a set, you know, number of things that you can work with to create what you want to create is great because it limits how far you can roam. It's a challenge to get to the end result. And like, there's a greater sense of accomplishment for me when I'm like, okay, I only use these 3 devices or something to make like a full track. One time I like challenged myself. I have this synthesizer that is like what's called a monosynth, which means it can basically play one note at a time. And I challenged myself to make an entire track with just the sounds that this thing could make, because I really wanted to learn the ins and outs of it. And I did like everything. The drums, I made, you know, I sampled individual notes and then replayed them as chords. I, you know, used the filters to filter sections of, you know, and it was like such a cool piece of music because I was just so on this mission to make it happen. Whereas when I'm like, I don't know what to do, I've got to write a song and I have a deadline and I have every plugin known to man, every preset, all the samples, and like I just don't know where to start sometimes. So you have to then take the effort of stripping everything away. Whereas like a guy who just lives in a bayou and plays a guitar has his guitar and maybe a broken bottle that he can turn into a slide to make blues music, you know, like, and then what do you get? You get fucking blues music.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
And it's like that person who's able to, in the case of blues music, be a black man in America living in an oppressive state, who's able to take only what he has and channel all his pain through that one thing, is going to make something way more meaningful than, you know, a kid maybe with an equal amount of misery with a computer with all the shit on it, because he's just got too many options.
Right.
It's maybe not a perfect argument, because I think people with lots of options can make great things, but the technology can really work against you if you're not careful.
Right.
So like with the Motown thing, to me is a great analogy, because it's like, first of all, we've gone through all these iterations of digital technology, recording technology, and where are we now? The best companies out there are emulating analog gear.
Yeah.
Or they're making analog synths, or they're It's like everything is returning to this thing that, you know, happens when you just have simple technology at your, I mean, and I say simple technology, but the truth is like the engineering that went into those early recording consoles is unbelievable. Like, the people that made those early tube preamps and things were like genius recording engineers that knew that to get the most beautiful harmonics, you had to combine these components. And, you know, like the bad preamps didn't make it because they could hear the results right away. So, but the important thing was that it was about capturing, you know, some kind of beauty and simplicity in the process. And it's just funny to me that after so much time with so many technological iterations, it's like a lot of the time, there's great really digital stuff out there that's like really futuristic sounds and whatever, but a lot of the time what people are trying to do is get back to that Motown essence, which is you know, just basically the sound of electricity and sound waves.
And then like the emotion of the singers and musicians. Yeah, and I think that maybe perhaps another way of saying this, and something that I truly believe kind of just in general, is like, I mean, one phrase that comes to mind is obviously less is more, but more so I feel what would be more accurate, and I would hope sort of encapsulates what you're saying too, is like, you know, there's anything that's like over designed is never good. Like, it's never great to be like, oh yeah, let's have like one plugin that does like a million different things. It's just like, no. Like, you don't need to do that. Just simply by virtue of using that plugin or something like that's enough. Like, things that are over designed, and especially I think that holds true even with like, anything like a product that's being manufactured or like song creation. Again, working with things in the studio or anything like that. It's just like when things are kind of over designed, you're never better off. But when you just are able to, whether it's working within limitations, intentionality, whatever else, it's just like, if you're kind of just straight and to the point and just like do what needs to be done and sort of not much else, that's usually where I would agree, like where you sort of find success in whatever it is that you're working on,
Yeah, and I think that applies to like all creative disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
It's like so I'll take what I know, which is music, and you guys both make music as well. You can agree that like, I would bet right now that the best music, your favorite music that you've ever made, you probably came up with very quickly in relative terms, like because you had an idea and you captured the idea.
Yeah.
And you got quickly down to the point. But those times where you've had a really good idea and then you're like, something's not working, or my string broke, or my computer's acting up. It could be that, or you could go, oh man, this is a really good idea, but before I do that, I need to dial in a delay sound or something like that distracts you from the original spark. And then you go down this path of like tweaking and twisting up sounds, and then before you know it, you've forgotten that thing and you're chasing this faded memory of what it was from 5 minutes ago.
Right. And it wasn't worth it And
I think like the best thing you can always do when you're trying to create something is just to go with your instinct and don't say no to anything and don't say yes to anything else. Just say yes to the thing that you had the instinct for and go forward on that idea.
Right.
And like that can mean a lot too for collaboration and stuff. Like, I've collaborated with people before where I just keep finding some fault in something they're doing or in something I'm doing, or rather than just going, okay, cool, let's get it down. And you can record as many things as you want and mute them later,
Right.
And the same thing goes for writing or designing a piece of furniture. It's like you can come up with as many iterations as you want and whittle them down to the best one. But if you spend all your time trying to make the one iteration the best thing it can be, you may be missing the point.
Yeah. It's like not being able to see the forest for the trees kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, anyway, man, listen, it's been so awesome to talk to you. Thank you so much. And, we really appreciate this and having you on the podcast.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, thanks again, Gavin. And thanks for everybody who's listening. We really appreciate the support. And if you have any questions for Gavin or for us or anything, feel free to reach out on any of our social media channels. As always, I'm Wes.
And I'm John.
And thanks again for listening to Music with Matt.
Have a great day. We'll cut that out for sure.